killed. It was her father who was the boss. And she says, you'll never know what it's like every time your father leaves the house. You don't know if he's ever going to come home. And one day he left the house with the men that you're with right now, and he never came home. They've already killed my father. I don't want them killing my only son. So I'm praying that you'll walk away from these men before it's too late, and instead you'll seek God for protection. I couldn't have asked for a better response. I reached behind my back and took out the gun I was just given. And I said, Mom, here's the only protection I'll ever need. I said, I can't see this Jesus who you're talking about and always praying to. I said, if I'm in trouble, I don't know if he'll be there. But I know this gun will be with me everywhere I go, and I said, this gun will take care of any problems, any troubles that ever come my way. So I don't need your God's protection. I've got my own. And my mother began to cry. And I saw her to leave the room, and I turned around, and I said, before I leave, is there anything else that you're praying about? And with tears streaming down her cheeks, she said, yes, I'm praying that someday you'll become a priest. And I said, what a foolish thing for my own mother to say. Nobody in this family has ever been a priest. Everybody in this family has been involved in the mafia except my father, and look at him. He has to work 2 and even 3 jobs just to bring food for us, and he gets drunk every night. I said, Mom, I don't think you understand. I don't want to be like my father. I want to be like your father. And I want to be more powerful than your father was. I want to be more wealthy than he was. I said, Mom, I even want to be more violent than he was. I said, so I don't need your God's protection. I said, in fact, I don't even need your God. I said, I've got everything that I'll ever need with these people that I'm with right now. So I don't want you ever praying for me ever again. She balled up her little fist, and she said, you can't stop me from praying. Those men that you're with, they've never been able to stop me from praying, and I won't stop praying until God answers my prayers. I laughed at her, and I said, you're wasting your time. The very next day, when I came home from school, I found all my clothes and belongings piled on the doorstep. My father had come home early from one of his jobs and was standing there, and he said, you want to be with those men? Fine, you can't live in this house anymore. It didn't bother me because I was making enough money to get my own apartment. But my boss told me that he refused to allow me to quit school. He wanted me to complete my education. But now that I didn't have to go home to parents every night, I was able to spend more and more time with these men, and they were teaching me more things and giving me more responsibilities. By the time I was 19 years old, I was given my first contract. They told me there was a hijacking in the garment district. It was an inside job, and they already took care of the people that were involved in doing this. But there was 2 men who hijacked the truck, and they were hiding in another state. And they wanted me to go there and shoot both these men. And if I was told once, I was told 100 times, Tom, whatever you do, don't kill either one of these men. We don't want them killed. All we want to do is make an example of them so nobody will ever think about stealing from us ever again. And they said, here's a driver's license in a different name. Here's a plane ticket in a different name. So when you go there, if you get stopped, nobody will know who you are. And when you get there, there'll be a man to meet you at the airport who'll know exactly who you are. And when you get there, he'll give you the keys to a rental car. When you get the rental car, inside the glove box will be a gun, pictures of what these 2 men look like, and directions where they are. Go there, shoot both of them, and come right back. Everything he told me was exactly the way he explained it. I went there, the man met me, gave me the keys, I got the gun, the pictures, the directions, found both of these men and shot both of them, got back in the car, and went back to the airport. When I got on the plane, the only people on the plane besides me was the police department. They knew my real name, placed me under arrest, brought me to jail, kept me overnight, and in the morning brought me before a judge. And the judge said, you're Italian, you're from New York, and you're here shooting people. What are you, a hitman? What are you, in the mafia? And at 17 years old, I had taken a vow that I would never betray the mafia no matter what. So every time this judge would ask me questions, I would ignore him like he wasn't even there, and it made him very angry. And he said, if you're found guilty, he said, and you still remain silent, I promise I'll send you away for the maximum amount of time that I could. I didn't bother hiring an attorney. I didn't want a jury trial. I was guilty, so I just pled guilty. When I went before this judge, he started asking me the questions again, and I kept my vow of silence. He kept his promise. Sent me away for 2 5 to 10-year sentences. When I got to this prison, even though neither my mother or father knew how to write, they had somebody write a letter. And I opened the letter and I read it, and the letter said, you've disgraced this family for the very last time. You no longer have a mother. You no longer have a father as far as we're concerned. We no longer have a son. He's dead and buried. Don't ever write, don't ever call, don't ever come by the house. I was finally paroled from the first sentence to the second sentence, was let out on good behavior, put on a bus, and sent back to New York. When I got off the bus, the first thing I did was go to a friend's house to get a gun. This is the thing that I had missed most all those years, having that gun as my security. That gun had become a way of life with me. It was no different than one of my hands or one of my feet. But I got the gun, but I didn't go to see my boss because I felt I had let him down for the first time since I was 15 years old. But he knew that I was out and he sent for me. When I got there, his opening words weren't "Hello, Tom," or "Welcome home, Tom." The first thing he said to me was, "Tom, do you have a gun on you?" "Carlo, you know, I always have a gun." He said, "Give me the gun," and I said, "No." But I saw a table close by, and I agreed to put my gun on the table. I wanted that gun as close to me as possible if anybody was going to hurt me. I wanted to be able to get that gun and kill as many people as I could before they killed me. I put the gun on the table, walked back and sat down, and my boss began asking me questions. He said, "Tell me about all those years you spent in that penitentiary." And very arrogantly, I looked at him and I said, "You see any broken bones? You see any scars?" I said, "You know I can take care of myself. I survived." And then he leaned back and he said, "Tom, is there any one thought that you had more than any other thought all those years?" And that was easy for me to answer because even to that very moment I was thinking, what did I do wrong that I got myself arrested? I thought I followed his instructions exactly the way he asked me to. And this is what I told him. And he said, "Tom," he said, "you're not going to understand this right away, but in a few minutes you will." And he said, "Now you're going to know why I asked you for your gun." He said, "Tom," he said, "you didn't do anything wrong." He said, "We called the police and gave them your real name and told them what you did." He said, "Tom, you have to understand, when we sent you out to make money, you always came back with a lot of money. When we send you out to hurt somebody, you usually hurt them even more than we ask you to. But we had no idea what would happen if you ever got arrested and had to go to jail." And he said, "Tom, all I wanted to do is see if you can pass my test." I'm sitting there thinking, here's a man looking at me smiling because I passed his test. But in the meanwhile, I had spent years of my life in a penitentiary that I can never get those years back. They're gone, they're lost. Was thrown out of my house. My mother and father, I couldn't contact them anymore, and I didn't care about my father, but I loved my mother, and I knew her heart was broken. And all this man could do is look at me and smile, happy that I had passed his test. All I thought about was getting up and getting the gun and killing him, and I could care less what they did to me afterwards. But before I can get up and get the gun, he had a book in front of him that he had showed me many times before. In this book, he had names of people who owed him large amounts of money. And before I can get up and get the gun, he slid the book across the table. And he said, "Tom, if you can have any type of business at all, what type of business would you want?" He knew I was always fascinated by the nightclubs and the discotheques, and this is what I told him. And he said, "Go ahead, take one." He wasn't going to buy a nightclub for me. He wasn't going to build a nightclub for me. He was taking somebody else's nightclub. I don't know whether they didn't pay him the money back, or maybe they were too slow on paying, or maybe he just didn't like the way the person parted his hair. He was taking their nightclub away from them. But the minute I realized I was going to be in control of a nightclub, I forgot about killing him. I forgot about all those years I spent in the penitentiary, forgot about being just thrown out of my house and not able to see my mother and father anymore, and I found myself smiling back at him, happy that I had passed this test. I looked in the book and I said, "Carlo, there's two in here that I like, and I can't make my mind up right away." I said, "I need some time." He said, "No, you don't. Take both of them. You've earned it." This was the beginning of me becoming a so-called businessman. Now that I had control of these businesses, I didn't have to go out and pull armed robberies. I didn't have to pull burglaries. I didn't have to go out and break arms and legs anymore to make money. Now I was a so-called businessman. Being I had a criminal record, I couldn't own these businesses outright, so I'd have other people put it in their names, but I was in total control of it. From these 2 restaurants and nightclubs, it went to 4 restaurants, 6 nightclubs. By the time I was in my early 30s, I was controlling over 40 different businesses, making millions of dollars a year for the Gambino family. During that time, Carlo Gambino died, one of the very few bosses to die of natural causes. Most of them die of lead poisoning. But before he died, he called his brother-in-law, Paul Castellano, to his sickbed and called me to his sickbed. And he said, "Paul, if I should die, you're going to become #1 of this family. But before I die," he said, "I want you to make the same agreement with Tom that I made some years ago." He said, "Tom's loyal. Tom will do whatever you want him to do. Tom's a money maker. Tom's not interested in titles or anything like that." And he said, "Paul," he said, "I want you to make the same agreement with him that he'll work directly for you." Paul had known me very well and made that agreement.